I've played a ridiculous amount of Doom the Dark Ages at this point, and after fully clearing the campaign multiple times, I've got some knowledge to drop for you aspiring slayers and veterans alike to make your playthrough as painless for yourself as possible and equally painful for Prince Azric's demons. Welcome to another installment in the Doom the Dark Ages Handbook. A quick heads up if you find this video helpful, I'm putting together an even more in-depth combat-focused video with some especially useful tactics for obliterating enemies that you'll definitely want to check out after this one once it's out. Alright, so to kick things off, I think it's 100% worth saying that the mindset you go into this game with is going to make a massive difference in how much you enjoy it. From what I've been hearing, a lot of people are starting this game up expecting it to play like Eternal or are heavily comparing the combat against Eternal, but I think they're really just two completely different beasts. The movement in Eternal was just way more rapid in terms of how quickly you would reposition yourself in 3D space by dashing forwards or even backwards, and then of course using verticality with the double jump as well being a massive part of movement. But don't get it twisted, I'm not saying the Dark Ages is a slow game, it's really far from it. But you could easily get that impression from the first two missions of the campaign, as they're meant to be slower to introduce you to all the new mechanics that the shield and parry system add into the combat mix. Once you get further into the chapters, you're going to understand the fun behind the combat, how much the shield plays into making movement comparably fast to Eternal, and how there's literally always something going on that you have to pay attention to, especially on higher difficulties. Yes, it's different from Eternal, but it succeeds in its own right for delivering on that power fantasy of being an absolute unit delivering brutal death blows to demons. So I encourage you to go in ready for something very different, and for sure play a few chapters to get the combat more ramped up before solidifying your opinion on the gameplay. Of course, if it ends up not being for you, fair enough, but as long as you gave it a fair shake before calling it quits. Alright, short rant over, let's talk about how you can become a slayer who will truly strike fear into the hearts of the hordes of hell. Now this will be relevant for everyone, especially those playing on Pandemonium or higher, but it's worth mentioning for everyone. So your HP bar is actually quite deceiving, and if you've ever red barred yourself thinking you're on the brink of death, but then somehow you've miraculously survived, well, there's a reason why. When you fall to 5 HP, the game actually has a bit of a grace period where you can't be killed and will stay at 5 HP for around 3 seconds before the next instance of damage properly turns the Slayer into the slain. So take that opportunity to kill anything to try and wrangle up some HP or armor drops so that your run isn't cut short. Now, if you're playing on Nightmare or below, when you finally go down, your life sigils will give you max HP, but no armor so that you can get back into the fight. If you're playing on Pandemonium, it's going to consume a life sigil and restart the level entirely. If you're playing on Ultra Nightmare and you actually go down, that run is over, sorry. An important thing to note as well is that life sigils never come back, so if you've picked it up in a previous mission and you were thinking you could farm an early chapter to rack them back up again, to get through a harder chapter, well, think again. They're gone for good, so don't count on them to keep bailing you out on Nightmare difficulty once you've exhausted them. You're going to have to start doing the mission right from square one once they're gone, instead of from your most recent checkpoint. This is a big one for minimizing damage and is probably one of the biggest reasons you'll be taking damage if you have this bad habit. When you toss your shield out with the intention of stunning, shield saw locking, or straight up killing an enemy, if you hit your block button prematurely, you will instantly retract the shield, dealing none of that damage and applying none of that crowd control, and instead possibly taking damage for not committing to the attack. If you're going to send that shield out, make sure it makes contact with your intended target before you pull it back for the block, unless there's a bigger damage threat coming your way already, like a powerful melee attack or a hell surge, and you know that you couldn't strafe to avoid it. Strafing is usually going to be the better option here if it means you can lock down a more annoying enemy with that shield saw stun, like an Arachnotron. To build on this, if you get greedy and you try to weave in a shield throw during the animation of a powerful melee windup from an enemy, you're unlikely to be able to pull back your shield in time to block it, as you're already locked in the throw animation. It would have to be early enough to saw spin stun them, and it has to be an enemy that's actually vulnerable to that, which brings us to our next point. While you may have become more familiar with using the shield in combat, it's worth noting that not all enemies are as vulnerable to the power of the shield saw as others. Specifically, you can never shield saw stun an enemy that has armor on, and you can also never stun a champion enemy either. So any of those guys that you see with a boss health bar or an icon above its head indicating that it's going to drop a demonic essence. Your best bet is always going to be heating up the armor on armored enemies until you can shield throw to shatter it, as that guarantees it'll break versus shooting it until it breaks off, which typically takes a lot more damage to do so. For champions, however, you're just going to need to burn it into your brain that shield stunning isn't going to fly with these guys, and that you're going to have to employ different tactics to take these guys out. On the topic of defeating champions, if you defeat a champion and you pick up a max health or max armor increase, you'll probably have noticed that you also get a full regeneration of that respective resource. So you can take advantage of this and play a little more aggressively against a champion that's going to give you one of those, especially a max shield, since it's going to refill immediately after anyways. Health works as well, but obviously things are a little bit more dicey if you're going to be giving up all of your armor in favor of aggression. And typically you get health back from killing big enemies like this anyways, so better to keep your armor topped off. But if it's going to drop an armor demonic essence, you can definitely be a little more aggressive. Do you ever find yourself fighting a mancubus or one of the other projectile wall conjuring enemies, wondering why you're taking so long to kill them? Well, funny enough, those waves fully block your outgoing projectiles, so you're heavily incentivized to parry block the green bits to force the stun and give yourself an opening to deal damage. Even worse, this means that weapons like the rocket launcher are definitely no bueno when those are up, as you will self-damage yourself on them instead. For the waves that are all red, you just want to strafe left or right to make an opening, straight up sprint to create even more space, or take the offensive and shield bash right into them to take the fight to them. Anytime you see these soldiers lined up, you should be smiling because it's time to go bowling. The start of Chapter 2 introduces the concept, but you don't really get to understand the power of it until later levels when there are rows and rows of enemies to knock over, especially once your shield is upgraded. While I do like to prioritize strongest enemies first generally, it's always a good idea to toss your shield out to mow these guys down to make the fight a little less crazy, since they will all fire projectiles and sometimes there's an overwhelming amount of these guys at the start of a large fight. If one of the soldiers in the line has a superheated shield, then that's your prime target to blow up the whole stack. If that's lacking, but there is an energy shield, as long as you have the shield throw upgrade that causes ricochets off energy shield, you're golden, or you can use one of the energy weapons like the accelerator or plasma cycler to detonate it, but I find weapon swapping to be unbearably sluggish, so unless you have it out, it's probably going to be a shield throw for me 99% of the time. Finally, if none of these options apply, you can just give one of the shield bearers a couple of shots to the shield to heat it up yourself, then launch your shield for the same effect. This will also net you a nice little bit of armor for each wave of shield bearers you take down, so you could always use them to top up in the middle of a fight rather than opening with killing them if your armor is already full. Adding on to this, any enemy that has superheatable armor that you can destroy will in kind drop you armor fragments when you break it off of them, which is quite handy for keeping that rare resource maxed out. Now, you've probably stumbled across those funny looking blue head orbs that you see a couple times every chapter. Those are called soul spheres, and they max out your health and armor completely when you pick them up. Now, you do well to pick it up if you've already cleared the area that you're in, but you should also try to avoid picking them up when you find them in active combat zones if you're not missing much of your armor or health. Instead, keep them around as a get out of jail free card and then use it as an instant top up once the area is clear. Alright, this one may seem simple, but believe me when I say I've made this mistake one too many times. Before moving on to a new area, always pop open your map and do a quick scan to see if you've missed any secrets if you're keen on maxing out your weapon upgrades as fast as possible, or you're trying to 100% the game by getting all the collectibles and codex pages. If you pass a point of no return, you're not going to be able to go and backtrack, and you're going to have to grab the upgrade or secret in a repeat playthrough of the mission. Even worse, if you're playing on Pandemonium difficulty or higher, you won't even have that option because you cannot replay chapters at all. You'd instead have to die, give up a life sigil, and then fully replay the entire mission, picking up everything again to guarantee that you 100% the chapter, but you're also risking your playthrough being killed because you've given up a life sigil there. So just make sure you're checking that map before you hit those points of no return. If you're playing on a harder difficulty, especially Ultra Nightmare, then you should always fully clear an area and look for secrets out of habit, especially if you're low on resources, just to top yourself off to minimize risk of death against the next wave of enemies. I'd say resource scavenging is far less important on lower difficulties. It's a lot more difficult to die, and running out of ammo doesn't seem to be a real issue typically. If you're trying to 100% the game or just want to be sure you're not missing any key upgrades in each level, then make sure to check out my complete 100% series for the game. There's a full playthrough singular video or individual chapter videos with a little more depth and specific timestamps for every single item in the game. You can find the playlist in the description or at the top of your screen here. Following the theme of exploration, a good portion of key cards or key skulls in the game will have multiple uses outside of opening the door that progresses the chapter itself. Sometimes some are only for secrets as well. So just because you've used the key once, don't be so sure that you have everything in the area until you've done a check of that map first. To that point, if you're playing a mission and you stumble across a purple key door, you do well to try and seek out that key ASAP, as they can have upwards of 5 different spots to be used in some of the chapters, so it's going to save you a lot of backtracking if you're keeping your eye out for the handy key projections that point you towards the keys. Your map will also show you the key location if you've walked by it but didn't pick it up yet. There are of course some exceptions where chapters will have a singular use for the key to progress the story and that's it, but you can definitely count on the purple keys having multiple uses in pretty much every chapter they show up in. Alright, next few tips are all about our good friend Seret. When doing the Seret missions, you'll often have to kill ships or multiple enemies back to back while in targeting mode. The issue is that you can usually only damage one of their core systems when you've dodged a green projectile to enable those more powerful shots, and sometimes it takes more than one of those dodges before it goes down. What you can do though is immediately after you kill something, you let go of your targeting button and then retarget onto the next piece of ship, and it will continue to fire using those enhanced projectiles from the previous enemy, sometimes allowing you to kill 2 things in a single go. This ends up saving you a bunch of time on those flying missions. Another quick tip for dodging those fast shots from the ship: if you don't see one of the enemy projectiles that have you dodge in a specific direction immediately when they start charging up, that means it's gonna be the quick fire projectile and you should just dodge right away in any direction, as the windup on those shots is incredibly short and you'll probably get hit otherwise and lose your chance at getting those empowered shots off. Next one is for killing those pesky little Hellfire ships. If you got the habit of pressing the targeting button for killing the large hell carriers, you're gonna want to be mindful to not do this when chasing the Hellfighter ships that give you gold. You don't actually need to target them at all, and you actually can't target them, but if you fly by something that can be targeted, you'll instantly focus on that, and then the Hellfighter ship is going to start getting away. I've made this stupid mistake a couple of times, and you really have to hustle to catch up to it again before it gets away, which could force you to restart the mission or reload from a checkpoint if you're trying to complete the challenges for killing them in a chapter. One other thing to mention about Hellfighter ships is that when you destroy them, they actually give you 20 gold every time you blow one up. Even though it doesn't actively show your gold amount going up, you can validate this by killing one, going to the pause menu, and you'll see that your gold went up 20 for each time you kill one. Now, you do get the animation that shows the gold exploding out of them, and the tutorial does say that it drops it, but it's very unclear while you're playing that this is actually happening. Also, if you ever miss a ship, you could just restart from a checkpoint and try to kill it again, but it's not necessary most of the time unless you've already missed one and are trying to guarantee that you complete a challenge for a chapter. You also obviously can't do this on Pandemonium or higher unless you restart the entire chapter. There's also usually more to kill in the whole mission than what the challenge quantity is, so you can get away with missing 1 or 2 sometimes. You can't, however, replay a mission trying to farm those gold bars. If you kill that same Hellfighter ship that you've killed in a previous mission, you won't get the gold for it a second time. Final tip for flying with Sarah is that you're probably normally waiting for an indicator to show up with the button to press for landing him when you've either destroyed a ship or are coming up to some sort of obvious landing point, when in fact you can be a ridiculous distance away from these landing pads, and all you have to do is just spam your landing pad button anytime you think a landing spot is coming up, and it will yeet your character over to it instantly. Pretty funny, and it saves you a few seconds every time. And that is all I've got for you guys today. I've got a ton of other knowledge to share with you in a more combat-focused video that'll be out soon or may already be, depending on when you're watching this. So if you found this helpful and are looking for more high-quality content on your favorite games, then consider subscribing and dropping a like or commenting to help boost the video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Rip and tear until it is done.